is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. Last time he was in the hallway of horror, he was rearranging his office, Stu Horvath.
So when you take all the books out of my office, that's exactly where they go. When they're in the office, you're like, it's not so many books. They're up high. You can't really, that can't be that many. Yeah, it's too many books. It's like hundreds of books.
Yeah, I mean, when I say hallway of horror, it's more for like your family as they have to kind of traverse that hallway. It's like a double dare challenge to avoid like toppling a pile of books.
It's dangerous, especially when you're 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Local boy injured in book landslide.
News at 11. How you doing today, Stu?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing? How's life as a married man?
You know, it's kind of wonderful and not much different than it was before I was married. For those listening, if this is your first episode or if you missed a few, last week I got married to Sally Canarino, who is now my lovely lady wife, as it were. It's awesome, man. We had a fantastic wedding. We did a private ceremony at a local movie theater called the Hawthorne 5, which if you're local, you should go see a movie there. They're nice people. And, we had Dracula playing on the big screen. It was pretty fun. And then the next day we had the big party with a much larger ceremony that you were there for.
Indeed.
Believe me when I say, dear listener, I definitely got the Road Warrior pop when I entered the room. It was pretty sweet. But it's a lot less stressful for me now because, like, anyone who's listening to this, who's ever gone through a wedding or is about to go through a wedding, I think you'll be able to relate to the Final Destination wedding edition scenario that I like to call it, that leads up to the wedding, which is like, oh my God, I got a pimple. Oh, I stubbed my toe. Did I break my toe before I have to be in my special shoes? Oh my God, am I going to get COVID? Did someone else get COVID? Is it going to like be a hurricane? And like, you're constantly like trying to not fall into the pitfalls of something that's going to wreck your day after you spent like all this money on like a wedding. So that part is thankfully over.
Yeah, man, you had some weather that was looking dodgy for a second, but I'm glad we got through it.
We had a tempest. We had quite the tempest. They shut down half the state in a state of emergency. So, yeah. I mean, they say rain on your wedding day is supposed to be very lucky. If that's the case, we are lucky forever.
It rained on mine, so.
It rained on yours too, and it rained on Geo's as well. So happy as clams. Sorry for the way I sound today, folks. If you hear me, I sound a little different. The interface that I use to record is on the fritz. I will have it sorted for next week. In the meantime, Stu,
how dare you? How dare you, John?
I know. Think about like an interface that I bought like 6 years ago that is just taking a new update being on the fritz. Who'd have thunk it?
Join our Patreon.
Yeah, I know.
So we can upgrade our equipment.
Oh, it'll be fine. But yeah, join Patreon anyway, because we like having you be a part of the squad. So we're talking about today
Halls of Horror. So I don't know if we've ever really talked about tiles on this podcast. One of the earliest things that I was fascinated by when I started like collecting these things was this series of 3. I think the first one is called Fantasy Tiles, and then there's Castle Tiles and Town Tiles or Village Tiles, something like that.
Right.
And they're all these beautifully illustrated cardboard, dungeon tiles, a top-down view of like a room, and you lay them out, and your miniatures kind of walk through them as you play the game. I love those things. They scratch a really particular bits itch that some board games. I think the thing that poisoned my mind, just kind of coming to me all of a sudden, is the board game Mystery Mansion.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, hey, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know.
Which was this really sweet, like, I don't know, 84, 85, 86, somewhere in there. It's very much like Ghost Fight and Treasure Hunters in its construction. You basically are going into the house. You're building the house as you go, which is a little different, which I guess is more like Betrayal at House of the Hill. And then you're looking for the treasure, and you need to get out with the treasure. And that's it. It's a pretty suck game. Like, the game itself is pretty unexciting, but the pieces are so good. There's 3 types of piece. There's the basement tiles, which are just flat cardstock. And then the first floor tiles are like these little fold up boxes, and then there's second floor tiles that are like an inch tall that fold up, and they're so good. They're just like top down, with the 1 point perspective, and they're just really evocative, and they sort of like evoke to me the movie Murder by Death, or like the Poirot movies.
Oh
Like there's just something really like cozy and scary about them at the same time. I love them. They're so good. And I had that board game as a kid, and it was such a letdown because the game itself was crummy, but and I didn't have anything that was really to scale that I could repurpose those tiles for. So it was just like this object of unrequited love. I loved it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I think that kind of translates to my love of tiles in general. In third edition, we used them a lot, like the modular dungeon tiles, or what are they called for 3 Dungeons and Dragons? Are they dragon tiles, or
I feel like they got rebranded as dragon tiles. I think they're just dungeon tiles, and then Daddy Cat came in and had to zhuzh it up a little bit, as it were.
Yeah, they were like punch out cardstock, and they were pretty cool and modular. But there's something that happens. I think that the more usable your tiles are, the less cool they are.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want cool tiles, Games Workshop back in the 80s did the coolest tiles. They're just gorgeous. I don't actually own, they have a couple dungeon tiles, like dungeon and cavern, and then there's like crypt, and a couple different flavors of typical dungeon environments. And then after Halls of Horror, they do the City Block set, and there's an expansion of that in one of the Judge Dredd box sets. And those are all great, but the best is Halls of Horror, because it's just, I mean, first of all, the cover is just fantastic. Games Workshop, man, in the 80s is just like how did this come about? How did you get such amazing artists to just kind of do stuff for you? Now, granted, Halls of Horror, the painting that's featured on the cover of the box, is repurposed from the fighting fantasy game book House of Hell. But still, it's an Ian Miller piece. Ian Miller is it's just like a monstrous talent. And like Games Workshop's just like throwing him everywhere. And it's great because all of this Ian Miller art is just so perfectly evocative of what I think of as that slippery 80s UK fantasy aesthetic that kind of comes out of 2000 AD and a couple other sources. John Blanche is like a big driver of that too. But like Ian Miller's just so good, and like he does like these crazy Tolkien drawings in the 70s, and then all of a sudden he's all over Games Workshop, and then he kind of does other stuff. He disappears out of role playing because he was probably too expensive, because he should have been charging more, because like there's just so much detail in his work. It's just gobsmacking. So yeah, it's got an Ian Miller cover that was on House of Hell, and honestly, that alone is worth the price of admission. Inside are 12 cardstock sheets, which you can cut up slightly. A lot of them are just full rooms per sheet. We've got some tiles that are for the basement, which are filled with junk. We have a 2-page foyer. Now, this is not geared towards fantasy. This is geared towards it's a house, so Call of Cthulhu, any kind of modern or semi-modern setting. So, and I think that this was meant to coincide with a Call of Cthulhu line of miniatures that from Citadel that just never manifested. They did have some modern horrors, but I don't think the actual branded Call of Cthulhu line ever came out. So you have a library, of course, and it has a nice desk and one of those sets of stairs on wheels that you can crank around. There is a full page sort of study, or I guess it's a game room with some stuffed bear and moose head on the wall. This is the foyer. Then we get some smaller rooms like a bathroom, which is full of white tile, and a little bedroom and a big bedroom. Those are all on one sheet. You can cut them apart. Then you get the conservatory greenhouse with lots of plants and glass walls. And there's a laboratory that definitely has something, a big wooden chair with restraints built into it, and a sinister looking figure in a glass box filled with fluid that is green, which is probably not so good. Oh, there's a head in a bell jar. Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
And then there's the basement ritual room, which is a full page, and there's a giant pentagram and candles, and it's so good. In addition to that, there's a dining room and kitchen. I guess that's a kitchen, or like a serving prep room. And then there's 2 pages of like I guess they're meant to be like floorboards. Yeah, it's like carpet and then wood, and then you can cut them up and use them as hallway spaces. And then there's all these tokens that you can cut out. So there's like additional stairs and doors that you could lay down. There's a Victrola, a tape machine, a coffin. There's 2 cars. There's a very small bathroom that's in addition to just a water closet, as the Brits would call it, as opposed to the full bath that has the bathtub. There's a bricked up fireplace. There's what looks like a big old wall safe, a mummy, and then there's a whole bunch of corpses. There's a dead person in a bathtub full of blood. And then there's some body parts, which is great.
Great.
You can always use like just an arm that's just laying on the floor sometimes, or a head.
Are these items perforated, or are they you have to like cut them out with scissors?
No, man, this was a hobby. You have to. You need to use a scalpel or whatever.
X-Acto knife. Yeah.
X-Acto knife. That's what they're called in the real world. I'm not an alien.
Crazy, man. Yeah.
Yeah. You definitely need a ruler, a straight edge, and an X-Acto blade. And it's just great fun. Like I just love the idea of like combining all the sets, like City Block with like a dungeon underneath this. It tickles my like, just throw it all in there. Nobody cares.
Oh yeah, my God. It's funny because it's something I never thought about all the time that we were playing like Cthulhu and Mask and Nyarlathotep, because it was all solely theater of the mind, you know. But I mean, coming off of playing, 3-5 with you, God, folks, if you could have seen the colossal amount of like books and like bags of miniatures and bags of tiles like that Stu used to have to bring out to, like, we stopped running it at my house because it was just so much stuff that Stu had to bring. Your poor back.
I was moving in once a week. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, you were like, you come to stay for the weekend for like 4 hours, loaded for war. Thinking about like how people do things with like iPads now, or like to build tables with like flat screen TVs in there to project the maps on. But like, I never really thought of like when we were playing Cthulhu, like a map for Cthulhu and miniatures for Cthulhu. But, something like this is actually pretty cool because it really does give you a nice top, even if you're not using miniatures, a cool top down like look at what the room is and what's in the room, like instead of handing it out and passing it around, passing the book around, everyone's taking like a look at the map. Like you can actually like take a moment, take a beat and top down look at it, study it, and be like, okay, this is what I have to do to get the job done here. These things look so cool, man. Who did the art?
I don't know. It's not credited, which is frustrating. Yeah, I mean, like it was a different era, and it is a bummer because the detailing they're really nicely done.
Oh yeah,
and like I love tiles. I love how they kind of illustrate sort of a tension between how cool, what it adds, and also what it takes away. Like they're also a pain in the ass, right? Like because they do, as soon as you put tiles on the table, you kind of want miniatures. You're building the barrier to entry and making it a little bit more difficult to play and to set up. You have to prepare that stuff. I remember when we were playing 3-5, for some of the bigger battle set pieces, I would have I used like a 16 by 20, like really stiff board. And then fun tacked all the tiles down to it so that I had like these big battle maps like laid out. And I could just plop it on the table. I also remember when we did the zombie house, when you guys were attacked, but like I had like 3 floors and they were like stacked so that and it was just like all this stuff and like it was cool. And I like doing, but I can't imagine doing that now. But I want to because it does add something. Like there's just that tension between like you bring up Mask of Nyarlathotep, and my online version of that. We have a murder board, which is digital through the Roll20, which is okay. But I really miss having those big printout maps that you would get at Kinko's, just so that you could see the city, the entire city, and having that on the wall just sort of added something that you lose. But then we have like these really great archives and the game notes are on the digital. So there's like all these like trade-offs. And it's interesting. There really is no, like we talk about how like there's no right game, like play what you want, have fun at the table.
course.
But that goes even deeper. There literally is no correct way to play. Like the structures that we use to play are all modular, and I think that the tiles, my interest in tiles and how they make games more complex while adding to it, and that trade-off sort of illustrates that all these things are not required, or are very required depending on your group, and I think that that's cool.
Yeah, definitely, man. And look, we just like looking at cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just popped up on the eBay. It's like $110 for this box set complete. So we apologize with what the price will end up being after this episode drops.
Well, it's funny because my buddy Oren got it in a secondhand store out in the Midwest somewhere, and it was not that much money. It was so little money that I was just like, yeah, of course, get that cool thing. Not even really knowing what it was. But then Jamie from Strange Attractor literally this morning was just like, sent me a video on this. And he's just like, I want this. And I was just like, you're going to hate me. And you're going to continue to grow in your hatred as we work together. Because whenever you say, I want this thing, there's a pretty good chance that I have it. And he's just like, I'm coming to your house and I'm stealing it. It's like, you live in England. Stay there.
Yeah. It'd be cheaper just to buy it on eBay, homie.
Yeah, true.
That plane ticket's going to be a lot of money.
It's true.
So this is pretty cool. I really dig it. Do you have any final thoughts on it?
Nah, that's pretty much it. But I do want to talk about the fact that by the time this episode drops on Monday,
indeed,
the very next day, my book will be hitting shelves. It's crazy.
Holy crap, dude. Holy crap.
We're having a little trouble scheduling the recording session for this. And I was just like, I was thinking we could just do a repeat. Then I was like, we can't do a repeat. The book comes out the next day.
The book comes out the next day. Yeah. You're going to go to Barnes & Noble in Clifton and check the shelf?
I am. And I'm already preparing myself for that disappointment of it not being there, because I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I literally have no idea how these things work, how soon a release hits the shelves. Do they have it in stock? I don't know. And I'm not calling around, like I'm not obsessed, but I will tell you, I had an idea the other day, it was yesterday. So MIT, as part of my contract, they sent me like a big box of my book. And while that is lovely and they look cool to have like a stack of 12 books, all, my book, I don't really know what to do with them. Like, so like, what do I do with them? And then I realized I could donate a couple to my local library in Kearney. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so I emailed the library director over there, and I was just like, hey, do you want one of these? And he was just like, yeah. So today, this afternoon, I'm going over to the library to donate my book. And I think that is probably the coolest part of this experience. I'm just so excited about this. I'm going to be in the library. If I was a kid, I would lose my mind finding this book, my book, on the shelf. Like it just like like when the monster book comes out, like it's the same thing. Like libraries were super important to me, and like making my imagination go, and like letting me see monsters and interface with the weird stuff that I wanted to. Because like at the bookstore, you're looking for stuff that you want. Like the library taught me what I want, and so important. And it's like circle of life stuff to like be able to put my book on the shelf there. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, having your book in the library has got to be like the book nerds version of a band hearing their song on the radio for the first time. Like,
right.
It's huge, man. It's huge, and you're right. It's being in the library is one of those things that like a person who is in there looking around is going to stumble upon it and maybe get turned on to like something that's going to change their life. Like you are from Kearney, you played D&D in Kearney, your game store was in Kearney, and now some other Kearney kid possibly is going to stumble through that library, see the book, and get turned on to a whole new world of adventure. And I think that's the coolest thing in the world, man. And I'm truly, truly happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you, man.
Big time fun, man.
You just reminded me that there's a section in the book where I talk about Daniel's Den, which was one of the game shops in town. Like I describe Daniel, and like it's like it just hit me that like there's going to be this like weird sort of like naturalistic account of a bookstore that's no longer in town but will live on in the library for as long as the library keeps the book. That's so like how
Yeah.
it's so cool.
Pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool, and it's something special, and that's how like things get to live through art, and that's something that we all should not take for granted, is the ability that there are certain things that are not just a time and place for one people. They get to be a time and place for everybody now because of art. So everybody, by the time you hear this, just go to a bookstore and buy the book. Pre-orders done. You can actually go to your favorite bookstore and get a cup of coffee, find your favorite book nook, and read Stu's book, Monsters, Aliens, Holes in the Ground, a guide to tabletop role-playing games from D&D to Mothership.
And if they don't have it, they can order it. Penguin Random House is distributing it. It is worldwide. If you go to any bookstore that you love, and they must have Penguin Random House titles because they're the biggest publisher in the world, just ask them.
Yeah, it's not shipping from the clubhouse, folks.
Yeah. Some people were a little confused about this periodically. John at the comic book store was just like, so when you getting the books in? I was just like, not me. I don't want. You need to go to Penguin Random House.
Yeah, we didn't. He didn't kickstart this, folks. This is coming from an actual publisher.
Dude, the 8, like they couldn't fit all 12 books in one box. The 8 books that came first was an incredibly heavy box. It's a 450-page book. It's just like, so it's like, I don't know, 50 pounds for 8 books. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of book.
And you added that to your kill count of dead trees, huh?
Hey, I didn't kill these, but I guess I did.
Yeah, you're at least, at the very least, an accessory. That's cool, man. So this is pretty exciting. I was lucky enough to, and I'm privy to a lot of things because I'm Stu's pal, and we've been doing this together for a bunch of years and been playing dice together for a bunch more. That I've seen early drafts, I've seen concept art, I've seen a lot, and I got to experience it before anybody else. And I can tell you, this book's the real deal, and I am truly excited to get it in my hands. And even though I could have went down to Stu's house and just, grabbed one, I pre-ordered it as well because I truly believe that there's going to be something special. This is going to be something that people are going to be talking about for a long time. And I think that you, dear listener, will also get turned on to a bunch of stuff that, we might not have covered yet. We're like 240 episodes in, but by the time you read it, you'll already know, and you'll be ready for us to talk about it.
Well, I was literally like, what are we going to talk about today? And I was like looking at stuff on the shelf. I was like, that's in the book. I don't want to talk about that right now. That's in the book. I don't want to talk about that right now. Like maybe. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in the book that we haven't talked about that we'll talk about eventually, but I've been holding off because it's in the book, and I already kind of talked about it.
Speaking of stuff that I don't think have talked about, there's a companion zine for this book.
Yeah. So even though the book is 450 pages and you could probably break a toe if you drop it on your foot, there was not enough room for a couple of chapters. So I have collected those, and in partnership with our friends at Exalted Funeral, we've produced a zine that is 9 chapters that were cut, one of which features an important game that is not in the book. It pained me to cut the chapter. It was written by our friend Ed Coleman, because I am not the paranoia GM. Ed is. I'm not allowed to write about paranoia. There are so few games that I am blissfully ignorant of, and paranoia is one of them. And I didn't want. I think it's an important game, and I wanted it in the book, but I couldn't speak to it because I want some things to be secret from me. So I asked Ed to write it, and it got cut from the book just because the book is very much about my collection and my thoughts on it. So having Ed pop in the middle of the 80s, while I think it is extremely funny and interesting, editorial decided that we couldn't do that. Boo. So I stuck it in the zine, and also making a return is the name Experience Points. So if you were sad that I did not call my book Experience Points, you can call my zine Experience Points, the lost chapters from Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground. That will be available for sale exclusively through Exalted Funeral at the end of the year. In between tomorrow, when the book releases, and whenever Exalted Funeral starts selling it, I will be giving away copies of Experience Points to anyone who joins the Patreon at a tier that has yet to be determined. It'll be on the site. It'll be clearly labeled. So if you want a copy of the zine for freeze, you can sign up to the Patreon and join us, have a good time, and get a zine for your trouble.
Well, very cool. Also, I would be remiss if we didn't shout out Kyle Patterson, who did just the most bonkers artwork on this book. Like, just wait till you see it. Derek Kinsman, friend of the show, friend of ours, dude, like, he laid out my very first book for 321 Action, Rocket to Russia. He's laid out Monster Alien Holes in the Ground. He's laid out now Experience Points, which I'm glad to hear that title came back. Just a lovely and swell dude all around. And wait till you see the work that Derek has done on these books. Also, our friend Joe DeSimone, you've heard him on previous episodes. He did fact checking, so we got a lot of our friends, a lot of people we care about working on this book. Stu brought a veritable A-team together to make the magic happen for Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground.
We should also mention, since we mentioned everybody else, Oren Gray did the line edit. He's my pal out in Kansas. My editor, Noah Springer, bought the book at MIT. His wife, Jamie Springer, did the copy edit. Was invaluable in polishing my prose. And Alex Safey did a sensitivity read, which just made me... He was very much like, you're doing fine. Like, you don't really need me. And I was like, no, I need you to tell me that I'm doing fine. It's all good. Like, that's the process. But,
oh, yeah.
Made me feel real. There's some stuff in there that I think is important to get right. And I think I did. And I hope I did. And if I didn't, we'll do better next time. But I tried real hard. I should also note that there is a story in Kyle's covers. The regular edition shows a band of adventurers at the start of an adventure. The deluxe edition implies a middle, and then the zine has the aftermath of some fighting fun that our heroes had. So that is something you should look out for. I think that's just a fun little detail.
Well, very cool. This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internets?
They can find me on the Instagram at Vintage RPG. I did do Halls of Horror. I shot it and I wrote about it, and it will appear in October of 2024, because that's how I roll.
That's how you roll. We work hard in advance. Not so much on the show because, we're currently trying to do things on the fly to get the job done for this.
Seat of our pants.
We fly in the seat of our pants, and also by the schedule of how it's going to work with book releases. Speaking of which, coming Friday the 13th, you're going to hear this episode on Monday. On Friday the 13th, I'm putting out a new adventure for 321 Action. It's called The Hotel Exorcist. You play a band of exorcists sent to a small Pennsylvania resort town to help the locals boot out a bunch of unwanted guests. It's a possession story unlike anything you've ever seen. We got a lot of cool stuff happening in there. We got some brand new art from Rafe Roberts, a brand new cover from Sally Canarino. Me and George are putting together a real badass story, and we know you're going to have a good time with it. Just in time for spooky season, Friday the 13th. Check out The Hotel Exorcist. Also on Kickstarter this month, Reverend Werewolf's Old-timey Monster Mania Family Hour. Levi Combs, our friend from Planet X Games, put together an insane zine with some heavy hitters. You got dudes from Neon Lords, Joey Royale, Father Goose, Cheese, myself, everybody contributing to essentially like a horror zine that is all over the place with like different monsters, different like little stories, different like little fun facts, and a lot of vibe. It's just a great zine full of a lot of cool vibe. And it is done in the Planet X style, so you can't go wrong with that. It's on Kickstarter right now as well. I'm going to be starting making con appearances next year. I got some pretty cool stuff coming up on the con scene. You're going to see me out and about more. And if you're looking for me on the internet, you can find me at John McGuire RPG on the Twitter, on the Instagram, on the Blue Sky, I think that's where I am. TikTok, kind of. I'm around, but you're going to see me more in person starting in 2024. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's book. We got a behind-the-scenes look at 321 Action. We've got a killer Discord community we'd love for you to be a part of. At the $3 tier, I run a game a month. This month, by the time you hear this, I'll have run Monster of the Week. I'm going to be running West End Games Ghostbusters in the tail end of October. I might do something else, and we're going to figure out November after that. The $10 tier, Stu has a West Marches campaign. We got that mystery tier coming up for the zine experience points. It's a great place to be. It's a wonderful community of people. And, we made a lot of friends out of there, and, we ended up hiring people to work on our books. So patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a Ham-Fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.